After seeing this film, you will never listen to the song Row, Row, Row Your Boat Gently Down the Stream ever the same way again. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week, I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. And no, you will never listen to Row, Row Your Boat the same, because this movie shows that rowing a boat can be very difficult. And I gotta say, I am quite pleased to have with us today writer-director Lauren Hadaway. And it turns out she's also a longtime podcast listener as well, which was really fun and added some juice to the conversation because she was quite energetic about her answers and in articulating her creative process. And look, The Novice, her film, is nominated for 5 Independent Spirit Awards, which include Best Film, Best Director, Best Editing, and Lauren Hadaway co-edited it with Nathan Nugent. Best Female Lead for Isabel Furman, and Best Supporting Female for Amy Forsythe. Without a doubt, as you're going to hear, Lauren was very generous with her time and was just fantastic about articulating her creative process and what it took to make her debut feature film. So I know you'll dig this episode. And speaking of things to dig, I know you'll also dig Backstory Magazine. And we recently published our winter issue, our Dune issue. Folks, you could read Backstory on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. And you know, one of the fun things about being a digital magazine is we keep putting in new articles into our issue between issues and have to change our table of contents, but we could do that. We just posted a huge Star Wars Visions article where we got translators to interview the Japanese directors that were on this amazing Disney Plus series of Star Wars inspired animes. And this was a great article that I know you'll all dig. We put excerpts of it online because literally it's a 5,000 word plus article. So you could read excerpts at backstory.net. And look, if you've never read us before, I hope you test drive us by reading our free issue. And if you like what you see in our free issue and want to become a subscriber, and I hope you do, I am here to sweeten the deal. You could use code word SAVE5 to save $5 off a 1-year subscription to Backstory over at our website. And that'll also help you out on the iPad. You could use the same login credentials. And look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and iTunes and Spotify and my YouTube watchers on the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could watch each of these Zoom interviews. So if you want to watch these interviews, you could watch them as well. It would really mean a lot to me to have you all support my passion project. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our interview with writer-director Lauren Hadaway about her Spirit Award-nominated feature film, The Novice. Lauren, how's it going? It's good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm a big fan of the podcast, so it's the first time seeing your face.
Oh, really?
Like,
okay.
Oh, yeah. Face cool. To the voice.
That's awesome. I love having a podcast listener get into the series. I'm sorry during the pandemic we can't do it in person and have it on the big screen, but that's awesome. I think this makes you the 28th person then, because I think the last time I heard this, it was the 27th person to go from podcast listener into the series. So kudos to you on that.
27th. Yeah. Thank you.
So okay. First off, you're in Paris right now, to my knowledge, and you went there kind of on a pandemic whim. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah. So I had an entire dramatic breakup in the middle of the Portrait of a Lady on Fire screening, Valentine's Day 2020, which inspired me to go lose my mind and go in a dark, hole and like shut off from the world. And for some reason, I decided it was March 13th, 2020. I stood up in Cafe Vita and I was like, I'm going to learn French and spend the summer in Paris. And then the next day, LA totally shut down. So the next few months were basically me obsessing over The Novice, editing that in my kitchen, and then spending 4 hours a day on French. And the pandemic waned on, post-production waned on, and it was sometime in July. I just said, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to move to Paris. And I did. I moved here April 2021 for no reason other than why the fuck not.
I like it. Are you enjoying Paris?
I'm enjoying it. It's been a good writing. It's been a good reprieve. I mean, seeing I got here, there was no one here. It was the city wasn't even open, and seeing it bloom and come alive and kind of resting from the shit show that was post-production finishing this film. And then too, I mean, it's great. Like everyone back home is unconscious most of the day. No one's bothering me. So I have a whole day to myself to be writing, to be in my head. And then, around 5 p.m. everybody wakes up and it's time for the real world. So
that's kind of great. I like getting that far disconnected from all your American pals helping you write. That's kind of that's one I haven't heard before, but I like it. Well, so riddle me this. Let's start with your breaking in story. Obviously, I know that you went down a sound path, but did you go to film school?
I did. I went to a SMU in Dallas, so it's more of a liberal arts school, but there was a film program, and I majored in film and double majored in business because I thought I had never worked in film and I wanted to, proper career back up. So
and did you enjoy film school? Some people are mixed. Some people like it, some people don't like it.
I mean, I have mixed feelings on it. I don't think, and my feelings on college in general has really changed, quite frankly. I don't think it's worth going into $150,000 in debt to go to film school or to go to really probably any college. I didn't graduate with that. I had a mix of scholarships and family helping and got a rowing scholarship. But I think for me, I needed it because I grew up in a small podunk Texas town. Like I had no concept, like driving to give you perspective, like driving to Dallas was a big deal for me. It was like, whoa, big buildings. Like it was fucking, deer in the headlights. And so getting to SMU, being in Dallas would have been ready to go from being an 18-year-old in Red Oak, Texas to LA or to the real world. That being said, I think that some kids, if you grew up in a city, if you're more worldly than me, sure, go right into working. Doesn't matter if you have the connections. I just didn't. And in some ways too, it's fortuitous. I mean, I think that what you get with film school is you get connections. One of the producers on the Novice, I knew him from film school actually. And it's there. I mean, I saw Kill Bill when I was 15. I knew I wanted to be a director and went to film school to do that, and quickly was slapped in the face with imposter syndrome was what I now realize it was. But I fell into editing, which I always had loved. I saved up, money when I was 15, 16 to buy my own camera, my own editing software, and was really into that. And that's something you can do in a dark room with no one kind of breathing over your shoulder. You're not having to like put on a show for people. People aren't waiting on you, watching you. And then one of my professors there, he taught also a sound class, and he showed our editing class probably to try and get us to enroll in it, like a clip that they had done where they took all the sound out of a movie, like a real movie, and replaced it. And I thought that was so up to that moment, I had never thought about sound. Never thought about it. It didn't occur to me as a thing that you did, which I think is most people, quite frankly. But that like shattered my world, and realize you can create this entire world, and you have 24 frames a second, but you have infinite sound possibilities. And for me too, I mean, film is a visual and sonic medium. Sound is half the cinematic experience, but people aren't thinking about it. And for me also too, it became another way to kind of work creatively and get nerdy into something. And no one cares about sound. No one's going to film school to be like like I had no competition. I was a token sound person. And that's kind of how that journey started. And I really fucking loved it. I mean, when I moved to LA, I really believe that I would be doing it for the rest of my life. But I had set these two goals when I moved to LA in 2012, because I think, anyone getting started, there's no path. Like whether you want to be a director, a writer, a sound person, producer, there's no like, here's where you apply at the thing and you go up into the whatever. And so I set these goals. One was to work on a Tarantino film, and another was to supervise sound for theatrical features by the time that I was 30. And a sound supervisor is like the main kind of head honcho. It's like the director basically of sound design. And when I was 25, I worked on the Hateful Eight. My first ever recording session actually was with Tarantino, which was huge for me. And I have that on my list of questions. So we are going to come back to that, but go on. Great. And then 26, 27, I was hired to supervise Justice League. And I had been hired on a couple of big projects, dialogue ADR capacity. And I could see that I was potentially going to hit my second goal of I might be able to be doing this. And I realized too, like, well, I'm going to be doing, once I hit the top of this career path, then what is it? It's me doing sound for other people's films for the rest of my life, which I love it. And I could do it. And it's a great kind of career. But I think also too, working at that end, working in the industry at such a high level, you really see how the sausage is made. And I think all the imposter syndrome that I really had kind of going into college went away, because I was meeting my heroes, actors, editors, directors, sound people, whatever. I was working with them. I was seeing, the fact that no one really nobody really knows what the fuck is going on. Like, nobody knows. No one has all the answers. And I also, too, coming from, small town Texas, you imagine Hollywood, like having like everyone's a creative genius and everyone's like a Steve Jobs, and you couldn't possibly compete. And then you get out there working with these people who some of them you admired your whole life. And yeah, there's a couple of people that I think are really, truly brilliant, but for the most part, people are just good, hardworking people, and they work hard and they're creative and what have you, but they're in the bell curve of like, attainability. And also, frankly, there's people who are fucking idiots who are also working at a high level and somehow in the same room. And so all of that kind of congealed. And I set a 5-year goal. It was November 2016. I was like, I want to transition into writing and directing within 5 years. So that's kind of the genesis of all that.
Awesome. Well, so, I actually had a similar experience to what you were talking about with just even film school. I had Thomas Holman at USC, the TH and THX, did that same thing that you were talking about, in which he took the sound out of the scene where Indiana Jones is running away from the big boulder and showed us like layer by layer how important sound was to put it in. And it was extremely eye-opening for me as well. And I got to say, like, there's a lot to talk about The Novice, but the sound design is really something else. I mean, you outdid yourself there. So especially for an independent film, but really for any film. But, I want to go back to something you were talking about for a second. You were talking about imposter syndrome, and it's for our podcast listeners that don't know, it's the feeling that you're not supposed to be there. Like you're doing what you want to do, but you feel like you're an imposter. So you're kind of working against yourself with an insecurity. And that's a tough way to go. And it's also pretty much the point of view that Alex is coming from in The Novice. So tell us about your history using the concept of imposter syndrome, along with developing the idea for The Novice, which I know started from your 2017 short film, Row. And as you just said, you were on a rowing scholarship. So you definitely know your zone. Tell us how The Novice idea formed.
Yeah, well, Row actually came after I had written the first draft of the script. And when I set that goal, November 2016, at that point, I mean, the thing about LA too is like people are like, yeah, I'm going to do this now. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. It's fucking embarrassing to be like, I have this whole career and I want to write and direct. Everyone and their mother wants to do it. So it wasn't something that I was talking about to people, but I started really researching, all very, very analytical, very Alex Dalian of me, perhaps, but started researching first films of directors and kind of the scope and the scale and the types of stories they were telling. And you come to this cliche advice of like, write what you know and write the film that only you can tell. And also, what do you want to see? And for me, there aren't a lot of rowing films, probably for a variety of reasons. There was a scene in The Social Network that I really fucking loved when it came out. I was in college at the time when that movie came out. But there's nothing else. And I had been flirting with this idea of writing actually a novel around rowing. I have whole novels in drawers no one will ever read. But yeah. And so, and also too, you need something small and insular, and a college campus is a small world, and thinking about budget and like all of these things. So I wrote the first draft of The Novice. It was actually July 2017. I was in the UK for the Justice League reshoots. I was sitting outside of a blimp factory in my trailer by myself, had nothing to do. I was waiting for the actors to come out between whatever they were reshooting to record a line here or there to stitch the fucking film together. But I had all this time, and I just started writing, and I wrote the first draft in 3 weeks, and kind of tentatively sent it to one friend who I talked to openly about writing, and I posted it on the Blacklist to kind of I wanted unbiased feedback, because you send it out, people are polite, whatever, but until you've had enthusiastic feedback, you don't know the difference. And there is a difference between polite positive feedback and actually enthusiastic positive feedback. And with The Novice, I was getting something different than I had with any of the other things I had written. And that kind of gave me confidence to be a little bit more open and open up. And the Rose short came when I was, at the time when I'd written the first draft of the script, was imagining a much even lower budget than what we shot. lower budget film, and trying to think of ways, because shooting on the water is a nightmare, and thinking, drones, could we use drones to shoot it? Could we whatever? And the Row short that's on my IMDb, it's actually just a 3-minute mood vignette. There's no story really. It was more to show investors and producers and things like, hey, I've done something, and a test for myself to kind of see, can we use drones to make this film? And the answer is no, you can't, but you can use them for like a couple of shots. And I actually don't have any idea if that, honestly, the movie vignette did much in terms of getting attention. I think the thing that really got the film, people to, like the producers and whoever, to pay attention, was the lookbook that I created, which was very kind of manic. And I tried to make something that captured the Alex Dahl, as if Alex Dahl had made this lookbook herself. And so it's very kind of scribbly and manic and crazy, and cutting collage things out, and try to capture the light and the dark of the film, and had some pages that were very crisp and clean and clinical, and some that looked absolutely insane, like the Joker had gotten a hold of them, and made this thing that I wanted it when people, saw the PDF and just like clicked on it and opened it up, that they could immediately, even if they didn't read a fucking word of what I had written on it, that they got the sense of what I was trying to do with the script. And so I think that actually did more for me than anything else, if I'm being honest.
Would you send that out with your screenplay?
Yeah, we sent what we ended up doing. We'd send out the screenplay, we'd send out the lookbook, we'd send a link to the little movie vignette as well. That was kind of our package.
Okay. I mean, that's a great plan. Before we get deeper, I want to ask you a couple questions about your sound experience, because then we're going to go full on into the Novice. But you worked on Whiplash, which was a great Sundance film, and they did a version of kind of like what you did by making Row. That nobody would buy Whiplash, no one would agree to make it a movie, and then Chazelle made it into a short film, and the short film won Sundance. And then he got enough investors using that as proof of concept to come back and then make his final feature, which also won Sundance a year later. What was your experience like working on Whiplash? Because I know you were going up and you're working with, just great actors all the way. So I'm sure that was a great experience for you. Yeah.
I mean, at the time I was just starting out my sound career. I think I worked on that film. That was probably late 2013. It was before Sundance happened. And no one knew who Damien was, and I didn't know anything about the film. But the thing about working in sound is I've worked on a lot of stuff, and people always ask me, is it good? And my honest answer is, I don't know. Like, I don't know yet, because the sound isn't done, the score isn't done, the edit is fat. Like, I have no idea if the movie I'm working on is good. I could not predict the Rotten Tomatoes score with like I have no clue. But that was the one thing that I watched like straight. Usually we get the project, sent the project, I'll sit down and watch the film so I know what I'm working on. I watched the film straight out of the Avid, and it blew me away. And I was like, holy fuck, this is amazing. And I remember talking to Damien, was there, on the mix stage, and if anyone's seen him from that area, he looks like a kid, like a teenager, almost like 20s. Right. He looks like he looks whatever, like, well, this kid's fucking doing it. And just having a couple conversations with him, and just seeing, I think maybe even seeing him doing it in some ways probably was inspiring to me. And I know that when I was thinking about doing the Novice as well, I mean, his career is something that I really aspire to. I mean, going from that to doing La La Land to doing First Man, I mean, that's huge aspiration. And he actually, when I was freaking out, we were shooting the film, the first week was water week, because we had to do it first. So my first week as writer director was shooting on the water. And after the first scene, which went brilliantly, and I thought that I was God-given, I was meant to be a director, I was like, I'm a genius. Then immediately everything went fucking wrong, and it was disaster. And I was like, oh, we're never going to finish this film. I'm losing all my director's money. This is the end of the line. What have I done? This is the end of my career. And I started researching articles and interviews that were done around all my favorite directors around the time they did their early films. I would set my Google thing and research. And I've actually found a quote that Damien had said about making Whiplash. He said that making that film every day felt like walking a tightrope between making something really beautiful and utter crushing disaster. And I was like, okay, so I'm like right where I need to be. This is like totally normal. And that, reading that quote from him, I think really it like changed everything, my perspective, and everything continued to be, does it feel like a disaster? But the way that I approached things was more like, okay, well, how do we solve this problem versus fuck, now there's a problem, everything's going wrong, it's not going to be finished.
We'll talk about that more in the spoilers section. Tell us your favorite story from working on the Hateful Eight. I absolutely love that movie. I did not feel it got its proper props when it came out. I still love it. I even love the Netflix version where they split it up into episodes. What was your favorite part of working on Hateful Eight? That was you fully doing dialogue editing and ADR.
Yeah, I mean, I literally have a tattoo of it on my arm. Like, you can't see my tattoos now, but I have a lot of them. I have it tattooed on my arm because it was such a monumental thing for me. The whole experience, it was something, again, I said, my goal coming out here was to work on a Tarantino film. And I had worked in Sound Deluxe when they were doing Django. And I remember I was down the hall when they were like editing for the horse sequence, all the horses galloping, and I could hear them working and thought it was so cool. And I knew that I had to get in and I had to work with this sound supervisor, Wiley Stateman. I was like, I want to work with this guy and I got to fucking work on the next Tarantino film. And I would try and, like linger in the hallways if he was there and try and like talk to him or whatever, and working with people around him and trying to like inch my way into the circle, but it was really hard. And I knew I was working on another film at the time, and I knew that the Hateful Eight was coming up because I worked with his sound assistant, and they were like looking at dailies, and I was like, "Fuck, this is an hour or never. Like, I gotta fucking make my move. I gotta find a way to get on this project." And I started being pretty vocal, like, I want to work on a Tarantino film. I want to whatever. And I think I found out later the assistant gave me the big assist to Wiley, just finally just like give her a chance. And so he hired me for like 2 weeks on Warcraft, actually, just initially 2 weeks. And I was just in the door. And I remember thinking, holy fuck, like I'm close. And then the 2 weeks turned to 3, turned to 4, turned to 5, turned to you're going to be the assistant on Hateful Eight, turn to you're going to now be doing the dialogue, supervising, turn to my first ever recording session being with Tarantino. I mean, that was the moment. My favorite moment was I hadn't done any ADR sessions, not even with, a D-list actor for whatever. I had done nothing. And I walk into this ADR booth. I have I don't even know where to sit. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing. Right, and the mixer was like, yeah, you sit here. And he was very sweet to me. And I was sitting there like just nervous as fuck. And I could just hear Tarantino come in, through the back door. I hear him talking and his voice approaching. And I was just like, oh my fucking God. Oh my God. And he finally walks in and like, there I am. It's me and him. And I think one other person was in the room. And I was like, holy fuck. I'm 25 years old. I made this when I was 15. I saw Kill Bill, and like that was the film that did it. I've been out here, whatever. I had done all this Hail Mary shit to get to that point to actually even work with Wiley Stateman, someone who I really admired as a sound designer and a creative, who had this reputation for really like forming young sound people, but also a reputation for like working them like to the bone. But I was like, I want to be worked to the bone by Wiley Stateman. I want to be in the door. And so that was a monumental thing. And Tarantino is very nice and receptive and, looking at me, asking me, no, should we do another one? And then getting on the mix stage with him too. I mean, him coming in and just seeing the interactions and having, I don't even remember what I talked to him about, but just having little conversations here and there. I mean, that was just the whole experience. I think it really was a paradigm shift for me, going back to the imposter syndrome in a way. I mean, that gave me a lot of confidence. And I think also, obviously, the credit is incredible. But from that point on, I really started evaluating what I wanted to be doing, where I want to put my energy, and these bigger projects were coming along. And that was kind of really starting the momentum that led to, I would say, to where, us talking right now, even.
Two last questions before I dive head first into Novice, because I've got to know, this has driven me crazy for years. You're freaking one of the only people I could ask this to. So finally answer. Because when I ask directors, they occasionally, and I've rarely done it in the podcast because I know it's like a hot topic, but like, I mean, in the sound world, and they rarely could give an answer. There's been a trend, honest to God, for like the last 20 years of intimate moments being captured. And our sound recording technology is so good that you can have actors nearly whisper and it works. But it's gotten to a point lately where it's become overused. And actors are so used to almost whispering that there's times where audiences literally complain online, rightly so, that they cannot understand what's going on because many of the scenes that they're practically almost whispering in, have score going under him, have action or gunfire going. And it's almost like a disassociation between the real world that they're supposed to be in and the soundscape that they're designed into. And I'm just curious what that's been like for you, working on the other side of that, because it seems like a difficulty. And sometimes it is great for a dramatic moment. I'm not undermining it as a concept, but sometimes you really can't hear what they're saying. And it drives me out of my mind.
There's a lot of things happening. One, I'm sure you're referring somewhat to Nolan's films, and he's been out.
Plenty of other people. I'm not even talking Nolan. The new James Bond movie, No Time to Die. Like, I loved it. I saw it in a theater. I saw it at the Chinese. Everything was perfect for that setting. And there were times in that final scene where it was just, Bond and the villain, that I could not understand what they were saying, even though I understood the story, because it was a whisper session.
Do you want to know what I think? Because here's what I think is happening. One, being on the set with, as someone who's been on set, obviously with actors as well, people aren't thinking that far in advance, first off, right? So that's where the problem begins. Now, when you get to post-production, a couple of things are happening too. First off, as someone who's doing dialogue, I mean, I will say there's plenty of films where this is an issue, where we literally go in to all the dailies, all the audio recorded for every single take, and we'll go in syllable by syllable, trying to add a T or a P or finding an alt for a single word and finding a take and cutting together like 4 takes and like cutting the sync to like get some clarity. So there's stuff happening to address this on some level. So that's one thing that we are aware of is a thing. And there's even dialogue editors there's certain actors that people complain about, like, oh, he fucking enunciated. Like, so we're aware. Then the second thing that you have happening when you get onto the mix stage. So by the point you're doing the mix of the actual film, everyone working on it has seen the film 600 times. We all know the dialogue. We've all heard it. Like, it doesn't matter. And so it's this case of like not having the fresh ears to come in, like no one's coming in with that to be able to say that. There are certain films that I've worked on where there's always like maybe a producer who's very like, I can't hear that dialogue, and people sometimes get annoyed or whatever. But then the other thing happening too is you're right about, if you have score, if you have explosions, if you have all these things happening at once, like the problem is that the vocal range, like where it's landing, it's all conflicting, and depending on the pressure, I've worked on mixes, insane stuff. Like it's also the note beneath the note. Like if someone's like, I can't hear this line, if you're in a hurry, if you don't give a fuck, if you don't whatever, you're like, okay, and you just push the fader up, like, right, like the volume. But that's not always a solution. Sometimes the solution is actually the score, the strings in the score are actually in the same register as the vocal portion of this person. We need to EQ out for this word these things. And really good dialogue mixers and stuff, and dialogue and music are mixed together, and then you have the effects person mixing the effects separately. So, and each dude who's mixing, it's dude always, I think there's barely any, there's a couple women, but each dude is doing their own thing and like their baby, and they want their stuff to shine. Right. So then you've got that aspect happening. And then too, with the dialogue, with that mixing, like you've got to like go in and notch these filters out, do all this stuff and get in there really nerdy and deep, which sometimes people, it depends on the mixer. And I'm sure there's tons of this problem exists with tons of films, but you don't notice it because the mixer's gone and had done it. And then also too, you have directors like Nolan who've straight out said like dialogue is the sound effects. It doesn't matter what the fuck they're saying. Like it doesn't matter. So there's a million things going on. I definitely hear you and then whatever, but I think, I don't know if there's an easy solution. It's no,
I think it's something people should be more aware of though, especially directors when they're getting that production sound as to what else is going on in the scene, because just the whisper take might not be the take. Even if the actor wants to do it, it just might not be the take, or you got to have a plan. But okay, last non-novice question for you. You are in the rare position of having worked on Justice League and then the redo Zack Snyder's Justice League and re-recording dialogue. What was that experience like? I know we can't do it in this whole podcast, but how surreal was it to find yourself going back a few years later for this really big, long, like rich director's cut and having the actors come back in too?
Well, I have to say that the whole Justice League thing is actually really poetic. And Zach has seen this film, and he as soon as he heard that I was making this, he was like, send me a link, because he didn't know that I was even doing this. But the film came about and like gave me the confidence to think, oh, I could do more, because it was a huge film project, huge actors, huge whatever. And then wrote the first draft of the script when the reshoots were happening for the Joss version. And then when I lived off the OT from, God bless Justice League. If the one thing that's great about the reshoots is that there was so much fucking OT that I basically, 45 days straight, final mix, 16 hours a day, golden time, 7th day. We're talking bank,
Wow.
right? So,
wow.
That is how I was able to do all of this, how I was able to make the Novice and like not have to basically, I worked enough to keep my health insurance and stay in the union and things like that. But otherwise I really stepped away. But then come 2020 and post the Novice, I was running out of money and starting to freak out a little bit too. And usually I can jump in and get a sound job. But with the pandemic, it's like, sure. I was fucked. But then I'm like, hey, the Snyder Cut's actually happening. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Okay. And I made this sort of deal with my boss at the time. I was like, yeah, I can, because I know where all the bodies are buried in that film. I know everything, all Joss stuff or old stuff, all of it. And I was like, yeah, I'll come on, but I'm finishing my film. And in some ways the pandemic helped that because I was at home. I could work from home and no one was really seeing what I was doing. And he was like, as long as the clients don't know if you're doing your job here, do what you need to do to get your film done. So he was very supportive. And then it was really bizarre too, working on the Snyder Cut because we went back to the old stuff and cobbling together things that I had cut like 4 years ago off hard drives, and it was utterly insane. And then on top of that, there's always reshoots on big films, usually obviously not half the film being reshot, but there's little things here and there. And doing like the Steppenwolf motion capture thing was so bizarre because these ADR sessions were happening on Zoom. And then we would have like a screen that was like streaming the film. And then we would have the actor wherever they were. But then we were doing like mocap stuff too. So there's literally some of the stuff that we captured. So interesting is like, we would send on Amazon like a $20, maybe I shouldn't say all this, but we were sending like a $20 lavalier microphone to an actor in the UK from Amazon, just so he wasn't recording directly on his iPhone. Because again, like Steppenwolf's voice, he's a normal voice and turned him into this fucking giant monster, right? And so we would take, he'd be doing that, but we're also doing the mocap at the same time, because if we're doing ADR for Steppenwolf, he has to be animated. So there would be an iPhone plugged in with the microphone. Then his daughter was there helping him. And then we'd have a second iPhone, like literally capturing the mocap. Maybe I can't remember if there's dots on his face or not, but he was like in his bedroom. I had to tell him, can you turn off the AC, like put as many pillows and things in the room as you can.
Wow.
And then we're all on Zoom. And so literally doing this huge film, expensive film, the VFX and this vocal design of this giant character, like on a $20 microphone and off an iPhone, which in some ways hopefully is motivating to any like young filmmakers, because like, fucking you do what you got to do. And it wasn't the ideal scenario, but it totally worked. I mean,
I'm surprised only a $20 mic though, like for ADR. Like I would think they would send like one of the fancy USB mics, and he'd have to do it on his computer, not into his phone. That's why you got
to simplify it, because we had another actor, like you have to make it as simple as possible. Like you plug this in, you just and then you just send me, I'll figure it out. Because we had another actor who had his own setup like that, actually, and we did a whole ADR session and he was recording his own audio, and come to find out he didn't record anything actually. And we had to redo it because he thought we were recording somehow. So yeah, it's like keep it simple, sister. You gotta do what you gotta do to get it. So but it was insane. And I was doing post-production on Novice simultaneously with that, and was working some 100-hour weeks. Wow. And then I had to take a week off the Justice League mix to go mix the Novice. And that's the point when Zach heard about the film and he's like, holy shit, like have her send me a link. But yeah, everyone kind of from that whole first career and in that path, very supportive, and the Justice League feels very kind of poetic in a way. So
that's awesome. All right. We are diving straight into the Novice. So, we're in the non-spoiler section. I want to talk about your creative habit for a second as a writer. Well, so Lauren, I'm sure you've heard me ask this question a billion times before, but I got to ask you, tell me how important outlining is to your process.
For me, the way that I tend to gravitate towards for stuff that I'm writing is I do a vomit pass of like, I have an idea and inspiration. I kind of know where it's going. And I just, it's usually like a 3 weeks. I'm just like, my head's in it. I'm manic. That's all I'm thinking about. I'm walking, I'm in a shower thinking about it. I'm driving, I'm thinking about it. I got playlists about it. that's it for 3 weeks. And then, as I'm working on structure and getting things down the road, I'll tend to think about the film. And I think in like a 4-act structure, what's the halfway point? Where are we at 25%? Where are we at 75%? And then you've got your classic kind of like act 1 and what would be going into act 1, act 2, act 3 for the normal structure, like thinking in terms of that and being very analytical. So I can get to that point in terms of beating stuff out, but I never outline. I've had to get into that a little bit now that I work doing some stuff for other producers and things, like having to get a pitch ready or do a treatment or whatever, which I frankly fucking hate treatments. I think it's like writing a synopsis. It's like the worst. I'd rather just write the screenplay than write the treatment, the first draft of the screenplay, because honestly, it takes the same amount of time and energy for me. But you know what? You gotta go with the flow and do whatever people need. So
that makes sense about a vomit pass and then needing to fiddle with it afterwards. When you sit down to write, do you give yourself a page count to hit each day, or do you go for a certain amount of hours?
I write every day. I mean, right now, because we established earlier with the sort of trying to work off, basically living off my savings. I mean, I go every day and I just sit and I'll write till I burn out. So it's usually hours, but it's not like I got to get my 4 hours in. Some days might be sitting and rotting at the coffee shop and write one word. And some days I might have a manic day. Lately, I've been in a K-hole recently of writing the past 2 weeks, and it's been like 10 hours a day, basically.
Wow.
But it's never really page count.
Okay. What do you do if you get writer's block? If you get it, how do you battle it?
Finding in this K-hole that we're speaking of, if I'm stuck on this pass, I've done quite a heavy revision, but I'll take a shower and just sit there and like sit in the shower, and all of the thoughts kind of just like settle. And then I'm in bed and they settle. And I'll reread things over and over and over. Take a walk. I mean, living in Paris, it's not a bad place to take a walk. But I don't really know. I used to be more debilitated by writer's block, but now I think it's just part of the process and something that's happened to me enough where you get to a point, and maybe people describe it differently, but you get to a point in your script and you're stuck and you're like, I don't know where the fuck I'm going. Like, I don't know what to do here. I don't know where this is going. That to me is just, everything's been simmering in the background. Like, it's just like accepting, like, this is part of the process, and just it's simmering. And it's going to come and hit, if you're receptive in your place. I don't know who said it, but someone said this thing that stuck with me. It's like, you have to show up every day so the muse knows where to find you. So you just go to even if you aren't writing and you're stuck, I don't break the routine. I mean, I write every single day. Eventually the muse will come,
That's great advice. I mean, that works. Ass in seat is going to get that script done. It can't be done if you're not sitting down writing. How long did it take you to write The Novice? You do what a lot of young screenwriters do, and actually writers of all ages, in which you were working a structured job, and you were writing on the side to get it completed. What were the challenges of writing, and how long did it take you to get that first draft of The Novice done?
The first draft was 3 weeks. I mean, that tends to be my go-to. Okay. And I wrote that when I was doing the Justice League reshoots, and I was technically working on another job at the time, but it was in that weird space of like, we were reshooting half the film and all the sound work had been done, and I had to waiting for the actors to come out here and there. And so I really wasn't doing a whole lot of work, actually. Someone knocks on my trailer, I'm quickly like, there's like plot of sound. I got to cut the sound. I got this dialogue, right. Things to cut. But and I think for me too, when I get in that headspace, and honestly, I've written the scripts I've written that are terrible, that I spent way too long on them. I found that if I don't do the vomit pass, then it's actually an issue. But with The Novice, even though the first draft was 3 weeks, even though the first draft is thing that I'm hopefully will be my next thing is 3 weeks, that's just the first draft. And then the writing is the rewriting and the evolution of a script. I mean, from the first draft of The Novice to when we shot it was 2.5 years. And in that time was going through life changes and writing those into the script and restructuring and working things out and figuring out who characters were more and more and more. I even did a pretty big, there's the final scene in the bathroom that happens.
We'll talk about that more in the spoilers section.
Yeah. But that came like pretty late, like maybe a week before we shot. So
wow.
It's a constantly evolving thing. Wow. And so that's again why I don't I just do the vomit draft, because I'm like, this is not the draft. Like, this is for nobody but me. Just get it out there, and then I'll figure out everything else later. I'll get the structure later. I'll put the clay on the pedestal, and then you shape it. that's kind of how I view it.
And that's completely correct. I mean, there's no one way to do it. That's what I love about screenwriting and writing in general. It's whatever works for each person. But yes, getting your version of the script out there, even if it's a bad version, and you could allow yourself to call it a vomit pass and get the bad version out there, means that once it's out there, you at least have something to refine. And then you could use all your great sensibilities and be a little more of a perfectionist. But I think some people do get in the way of trying to be too much of a perfectionist early on. So even for writers that outline, and as you said, like you like going straight to your draft, but even for writers that outline, they sometimes are too much of a perfectionist going from outline to draft, and they should still do a vomit pass, in my opinion, to make life easier for them and more livable. Everybody's been curious, obviously, because you're an independent filmmaker. What could you tell us about your budget and schedule? And that's our last question before we get into the spoilers.
Budget's 1.9. And the schedule is, I think we did 24 days in a Splinter Day. And so it started, I believe, as 21 in a Splinter Day. And then Water Week happened, which was our first week. And within 3 days, we had added 2 days to the schedule. And that went our post budget. Hence me doing all the things I had to do later. So
what year did you shoot it?
We shot October, November 2019.
Okay, so it was before the pandemic. Wow, you got it right in there.
We scripted. We had a moment though too where we were having casting things were going down, and we had this moment of like, should we wait until March 2020 to shoot it? Oh. And I remember telling my producers, no, we're fucking going now. Like, who knows what's going to happen? And I was thinking, you know, I thought the film was going to go 3 times, and it didn't. Like, really thought it was, and it didn't. So I was like, I'm not fucking going through that again. We're going to go now. And lo and behold, there was a pandemic. Couldn't have guessed it.
Yeah. Well, so tell me this. What could you tell us about the process of raising a budget, which is really hard to do as a first-time filmmaker? What was the tips that you would give people going down that path themselves? I
mean, it is really hard. It's so nebulous. Even now that I've made like, you know, one film, and in theory, things should be slightly more easy, right? Knock on wood, because you're not a first-time director anymore, but it's just using, I mean, this is with anything in the industry. What connections do you have? And I didn't even know how to really make a film. Like, where does the money come from? Like, I'm figuring all that stuff out as I go. But with Zach on board, and then one of my producers who found me off the blacklist, who's now my manager, and then Ryan, which we mentioned, we talked about film school, and like, do you need it? Do you not need it? Well, Ryan, I met in film school, and I had done sound for another indie that he had produced actually a couple years prior. So he was like the one person I knew that was producing stuff and actually making stuff. And he had a producing partner who's actually EP on this film. And I knew that they had there was some financing options there. So sent them the script, and they were super into it and came on board pretty quickly. And then from there, Zach and Ryan kind of teamed up and were sending it out to the people that they knew, like their connections. I didn't know. I don't know what the fuck's going on. They're sending it out kind of all around town and getting the passes, getting a couple meetings. Then we sent it to another producer. We had this great meeting. They came on board, not with financing, but then basically with their connections. And so then they're sending it out. They're making their calls. They're calling agents. They're doing their thing. And that's how we found another hunk of the budget. And that all happened very quickly, frankly.
How long did it take to raise the money?
Well, that money... This is 2 separate things here. That money took months. And I was like, this is fucking easy. Like, we're going to be shooting 2018. Like, and then because I naively thought like, it's the same, the first thing we shot too, it went so wonderfully. And I was like, I'm meant to be a director. This is a piece of cake. And then everything just went to shit. Right. So we got all this money like pretty quickly, and naively thought that it was going to continue to be that easy, but it wasn't. And then we spent the next year and a half basically trying to find the rest of it, and had all these cases of having leads and some weird shady things. I don't even know what they are, like shady people coming in and weird kind of things. And then you got tax credit loans happening, you know, all of this weird shit going on. And like, I honestly had given up on the film that it was even going to happen. And I wrote the first draft of the script that I'm deep in on right now, like in that time period in summer of 2019. And imagine that being my first film. And then Ryan kind of out of nowhere was like, Lauren, you're going to go to Toronto to location scout. And I didn't believe it. Like, I was like, is this real? Because I can't go through this again. It's like, it feels like your heart is being just ripped apart every time you naively get excited. And then and then it just falls, it just crumbles. So I was kind of only half-assed in it. It took a few days to actually believe, okay, we're doing it, something's going to happen here. But what ended up happening with the financing was the producers, the EPs who came on board, ponied up a little more. We slashed the budget like a lot. And I did a pass through script, like thinking about that, like, okay, how can we combine locations? How can we get rid of locations? Can we combine any characters? Can we, how do we get rid of some of these extras that we need? Like, I did a whole pass on the script to try and get the budget down in that way too. And then, we also went in shooting, like knowing that there was no money for post-production, but again, with my background in post, it was like, well, worst case, I can get us started. And that's what happened. Like we finished shooting and we had no money left. So that's why I started editing it. But here we are. We have a film.
Yeah. That's a wild ride, but it's to be expected. Well, so, okay. We have run out of non-spoiler questions. Podcast listeners in iTunes and Spotify, YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page. If you have not yet seen The Novice, press pause and go rent it. It's available everywhere. It's also up for an Independent Spirit Award. And congrats on that, Lauren, by the way, because that's pretty awesome too. And so go watch it, because we are going to now get straight into the spoilers. Look, Alex is a great character, and she is obsessed with winning at all costs for this sport that she just kind of falls into as a novice. I mean, per your title. And it's kind of wild because she's so driven, and her hyper focus makes it absolutely fascinating to watch, because she's learning about this world as she's getting into it. So are we. And she's kind of close to teetering on and off on her path many times. And she's trying to find that balance of how to stay in school with the scholarship that she does have, which is science-based, while also dedicating almost all of her time to rowing. And I'm kind of curious, because you said you had your own rowing experience. When did that idea come about that Alex was going to be not a girl that really wanted to row all her life and she's making it come true, but just something she does on a whim, and she's looking for a new sense of belonging? Because I think it's a cool character trait. It's a cool way to get us used to the world.
Yeah, I think I love these obsessed artist trope films, but I wanted to do a version of it where she's internally motivated. And the other thing that I think too, and I get it, and we need in cinema, the film is a visual medium. You need like to see things. You need to see the conflict. This is not a novel. I didn't want to make a film with voiceover. And then the second thing too, film, like we want like why. And I think in life too, as human beings, we search for like, why am I the way that I am? But in life, there's 1,000 little things that have led up to who you are as a person. And I think for Alex, like, I think she finds purpose through just achieving like these gritty endeavors, like through being gritty, through achieving things. And I've kind of thought a lot about this through doing interviews and making the film and listening to, you want to get really, really down granular. Think about like dopamine release, like happens when you achieve something. Like part of the vomit draft, why I think it's so important is like, you've got a script and like, it feels so good. Even if it's total trash, you have a script. And that is like this release of dopamine. And like, I fucking did it. And dopamine is this neuro thing that this motivation that keeps you going. And so if you want to like hyper analyze Alex and why she functions, like that's probably it in some ways. Is she starts into some way. She finds like, if she can do these things, and we get some of her backstory, and it's a slow unraveling. Like I want who she is to be this mystery almost that you unravel. And we're watching her almost as a zoo animal creature, but she likely, like, these things happen in school. You do something, someone gives you positive reinforcement, and that's the thing you're going to gravitate towards. If someone compliments, your shirt that you're wearing, you're probably going to be wearing that shirt a lot more. Like, these are the things that form a character, right? But those aren't like sexy solutions. And for me, I think too, if this was a film about someone wanting to be an artist or someone wanting to win like the big game, people would accept it, because we have this entire film literacy. We're all literate in that regards to cinema. We've seen a million films like it, right? But because this is a gritty person finding purpose through gritty endeavors, it's this weird kind of thing that I think some people are frankly turned off by, which I think is totally fair. But for me, like, that's what I wanted to explore. I wanted to explore what I wanted to see on screen. I wanted to explore the obsessed artist film where someone is internally driven and who's going after these things. Because when I was rowing, I was completely obsessed with it. Did I ever think I was gonna go to the Olympics, make a career of it? No, I wanted to get into the first boat. I'm not built to be a rower, but why did I do it? Like, I don't know. I just did, and I couldn't quit. And I think Alex, the same way, it's like a dog catching onto, sees a squirrel, their prey drive kicks in and they just fucking go. And you're going to have to yank that dog by the leash to kind of get them moving or whatever. Like, she's latched onto this thing and she's going to fucking do it until she feels like she's accomplished it.
Yeah. It's interesting because this is essentially, in my mind, you could correct me if you'd like, because I'm sure I'm probably wrong. I'm wrong about everything, but this seems like an anti-hero story. Like, there's no real antagonist. At the beginning, you think maybe Jamie might be her antagonist because Jamie's her competition. But at the end of the day, Alex is her own worst enemy. To me, this reads like an anti-hero story. Do you agree? Or was there somebody else?
No, Alex is the hero and the villain of the story. And I think this is, Isabel's talked about this a lot in interviews, but when she's starting, she's the underdog and we're almost rooting for her. Like, yeah, go do it. And then things start kind of spinning slowly out of control. And then you're getting to the point where you both want her to accomplish this thing, but also you want to be like, no, stop. So it's this weird situation. And I do agree with that. I don't think, and everyone else in the film, like, there's a lot of characters in the film who push back on Alex or you could argue are mean or whatever, but they all have their own motivations, I would say. And they all have this, like, I could totally reason for what Jamie does and her point of view and everything and totally be like, yeah, Jamie's the hero of the story. But yeah, people are complex. And I like this idea of exploring a nuanced character.
I enjoyed that too. And the coaches, sometimes in a sports movie, which is a genre this could fall into, coaches are sometimes antagonists. Nope, not here. Like, the coaches are very fair and balanced. They're edging her along. They're encouraging her. They know she's a little quirky, but at the same time, they have seats in a boat to fill, and she's right there for it. And she's clearly working hard, so they're into it. So, I mean, that was cool to see too. I guess one of the things that's really interesting is about her being an outsider. And, she has her own presidential scholarship, so she's set. And early on, it's very clear that Jamie needs to get a certain seat to get a scholarship so that financially she could afford this college. And Alex she likes to think of society as a meritocracy, I think, is maybe one of her character flaws, in which, while we see the rest of the girls on the team band together to kind of help Jamie achieve that scholarship, Alex still wants that seat, even though she has a scholarship. Like, it could have been a different coming of age story where Alex finally, like, you know what? I want to help you out, Jamie. Like, I want a lasting friendship for the rest of my life and to be a part of this great team. But that's not at all what happens. And it's really an interesting drive in which Alex accomplishes her goal of making varsity, and she just won't let it go that she wants the seat, even though she knows it could knock Jamie completely out of school, because she can't afford to go there anymore if she doesn't get that scholarship. Talk about crafting that dynamic, because I really loved it. And it was a cool element that's kind of driving underneath the rest of the story of, is Alex going to flex, or is she going to, remain impenetrable in her goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, the thing that's happening is that Alex has her own goal and Jamie has her own goal, and they're just very different. And so why would Alex give that up? But the other thing, I think, even if Alex is very internally driven, that she has chosen Jamie. Little does Jamie know, she's chosen her as the benchmark for how she rates how she's doing and herself, because we unravel this through the course of the story. But, she has this background of sort of, you get the idea that she falls into the bell curve of average. And the analogy I like to use is that Jamie is a Ferrari and Alex is a Honda. And if both of them are on the freeway and the Ferrari is cruising and the Honda is willing to pedal to the metal and blow its engine out potentially, the Honda can beat the Ferrari. And so I think, like, that's the situation that's happening here. So in some ways too, Jamie's need for this scholarship and this willingness to do all this stuff and then to get all sort of what the fuck's wrong with you about it, even fuels Alex's sort of drive even more than had she been chill about it, because she's driven by she's sort of like motivated by these naturally gifted people who excel and just sort of ride the high. And she wants to see if she can like push herself into the top edge of the bell curve of average. Like that is her goal. So this whole shit in some ways is like actually fueling, like, you know what, fuck you, you're doing the exact thing I can't stand. Like you're just writing, you're just like cruising, like it's like it's sick twisted. I mean, yeah, you could argue that Alex is the antagonist. She's awful. Like why wouldn't she do that? But at the same time, like if you were in that situation and you wanted that seat, like I will beat me, we'll get in the boat. And if you win the race, like you'll win the race. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think Alex is frankly totally right to do what she does. Maybe not to the extreme, but in the sense that absolutely. Like if you earned it on the screen,
sure. You set out the argument in which, I think what fuels her is when Jamie accuses her of having a silver spoon in her mouth and being a silver spoon like these other girls. But then she realizes that she too is there on scholarship. So it's kind of a lame accusation. And that further increases Alex's want to defeat Jamie, even though they're supposed to be on the same team defeating other schools. But yeah, like it's a really cool dynamic. And the other thing that your story did really well, and we'll talk about this even more in the editing section, is that you really show her dedication to it, in which Alex, her life is taken over with rowing. It's all that she's thinking about, even when she's in class. And, let's get to that actually right now while I'm on it for a second. You did this great thing in which you were able to show her hyper-focusing. And you did it two ways. You did it in your soundscape, in which you were muting out and taking away whatever conversations she was in that had nothing to do with rowing. She's generally tuning out. And you were either using special effects or really crazy shaved lenses to get the rest of the world out of focus, generally around her multiple times. So first off, answer that. Were those crazy lenses they were using, or long lenses with great depth of field? What were you doing for some of those shots? Because I loved the way that the world was going in and out of focus.
I don't know. I mean, there's a couple things happening with some of the shots. We actually had one lens that was broken, which we discovered in the makeup test by accident when Isabel put her head into the thing to make a funny face. And me and Todd, the DP, looked at each other like, this is our fucking crazy Alex lens. And, not like, we're not going to fucking fix this thing. No, this is our lens. So that was a special lens that we whipped out in certain occasions. And then too, I mean, yeah, this is something we talked about as well, like wanting this very shallow depth of field, wanting to feel like locked into her headspace and claustrophobic. Like, rowing is a beautiful sport, but it's boring to watch. Like it's not cinematic. Like I went to a regatta recently and watched the boats go by, and I was like, this looks like, it's whatever. But I know, having been in that boat, like how it feels. And like you feel like you're dying, like you're blacking out. I like almost blacked out. Girls have pissed themselves in the boat. Like, this stuff is intense, but it doesn't look that. So the challenge becomes, as a filmmaker, like how do you convey to the audience, 99% of whom who don't know anything about rowing, and probably most of them who've never experienced this level of obsession, like how do you put them in that headspace? And it goes back to film being this visual and sonic medium. And so I can't tell the story with voiceover, or it's not a novel. We can't have all that. So you use these visual things, you use the lens, you use the shallow depth of field, you use the juxtaposition and the dynamics of the sound, from going to silences to these crushing sort of abrasive things. And you fuck with all these things. I mean, the entire goal for me of this film was to make the audience feel uneasy constantly, and like not on your edge. Like I don't want them to feel like they can breathe. And there's even a scene like early in the film, like probably around 18 minutes, the 500 frames a second slow motion rowing sequence where the spotlight like comes on, and then she's like rowing 500 frames a second. It's like shot like a sex scene. That is like the first kind of really weird, trippy moment. I mean, there's a couple things before that, but that's like really it. And one of the producers, every time that we did a pass, he always had the same note, like, Lauren, I think it's too jarring. And I'd be like, Steve, I see your note. I hear your note, but I'm not going to do whatever. Like, this is a criticism coming from you, but it means for me that it's working. Like, I want it to be jarring. Yeah. I want it to feel like a punch to the face. And so that's just constantly exploring kind of those dynamics every way possible. Like, how can I punch the audience in the face, for lack of a better expression.
But I'm curious, did you ever use a green screen for your focal shifts?
No green screen.
Okay.
Nothing.
All right. That's awesome. Ooh, hey, I'm jumping in really quick to remind you to check out Backstory Magazine. We just published our Dune issue, our winter issue. I love it so much. There are so many great things to read in here. And we always put in new articles in between issues because we're a digital magazine. We could do that. So I think you would enjoy checking out the latest article we just popped in, which is a 5,000 word interview with 4 of the directors of Star Wars Visions. That's the Disney Plus Star Wars anime series of short films, and they're really fantastic. And it took us a long time to get these interviews done, and they turned out really well. You could even read excerpts of them on our website, backstory.net, to get a sense of what the rest of the huge article is about. And look, if you've never read us before, you could test drive us by reading an entire free issue at backstory.net or via our iPad app Backstory. And if you like what you see after reading the free issue and want to become a subscriber, and I hope you do, I'm here to sweeten the deal, and you could use code word SAVE5. That's SAVE and the number 5, and it will save you $5 off a 1-year subscription to Backstory Magazine. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and iTunes and Spotify and the YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where all these Zoom interviews go. So you could actually watch us do the interview if you would like to. It would really mean a lot to me to have you all support my passion project and become a subscriber. So thanks for considering. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right back into our conversation with writer-director Lauren Hadaway about her Spirit Award nominated film. It's up for 5 awards, and voting starts on February 11th, 2022. So let's get right back into our conversation about her debut feature film, The Novice. One of the things that I didn't expect was a relationship in the movie, which was cool, that she has with her TA, Danny. But I actually want to skip forward. I'll get back to that in a second. But I think a definitive moment is when her and Danny go play pool. And Alex tells a very long story about her quest to win and how in high school she wanted to unseat the valedictorian, even though she knew she didn't have the knowledge that he had. She figured she would work harder and figure out ways around it. She tells this very roundabout story, and you're very funny, in which Danny keeps trying to guess the ending, which makes it amusing for the audience. And, she's like, no, but this is what happened instead. Tell us about that drive, because it really is what Alex is trying to do and why she thinks she deserves that seat. And it doesn't matter about Jamie's, scholarship, because she figures, you're going back to your Honda Ferrari analogy. She figures if she puts in the time, she deserves what she gets, and nobody should get any sort of a special consideration or treatment. And if she can't get what she wants, as she explains with the valedictorian speech, she will go through a different sort of chess to arrive at that end, which I really kind of loved. And I thought it was very definitive of her character. The minute that scene hit, I thought the rest of the movie was crystal clear what she was doing in every single scene. Yeah,
I mean, that scene was supposed to be the kind of big reveal. Up to that point, you're probably wondering why, even the way that we edited the film with sound, with the sort of her doing this, you're not given a clear reason. Like, you're unfolding, and that scene is kind of like, oh, this is a pattern of behavior that she's having. She majored in physics, which is her worst subject. She had this whole experience in high school, and then you find out later when she's in the bathroom with Danny, when they had this breakup, that she actually didn't even make it to graduation because she was 5150'd, and she's basically pushed herself to the breaking point. And I think too, I mean, the thing with the guy specifically, in some ways, I imagine this as being the sort of her villain origin story, this high school experience with this guy. And this is actually based on something that I went through in my my high school experience. There was actually this guy in all my classes who irritated me, and he dated one of my friends, and they broke up. And for whatever reason, I just latched on to him, and I was like, I'm going to beat him in class ranking. Classic fucking nerd situation. But it was a total thing, and I don't know. And again, it's like, why is Alex doing this? Why did I do this? Like, why was I obsessed with rowing? Why is she obsessed with rowing? Like, this is really my exploration of that. Like, why are we obsessed with anything? Like, what is that? It's really a character study. But yeah, I mean, I totally pulled the Alex and was like trying to beat this guy. And that was my motivator. And there was this big moment we found out graduation day, like, who won? It was me. And like all my friends and everyone was just like, fuck yeah. And so, and it goes back to, Thank you. Going back to what I was saying about get fucking nerdy, the dopamine thing. Like if you have those moments where you've been striving to achieve something, and the whole idea of like why gambling and things are so kind of addictive is the intermittent reward. Like if every time you do something you get a reward, it ceases to become a thing. What you need is like this sort of, you need failure for the wins to feel like magic. And so Alex has plenty of fucking failure in her life, but she gets that win every now and then, and it just like feeds this fucking thing. And I think this is in some ways is an addiction to these different things. And so she lashed into that guy, and now she's into rowing. She's lashed on to it for whatever reason. And then all of these things, all these efforts that she puts in to succeed, that when she fails, in some ways it just drives the addiction further. It's like the gambling addict going like, I just need one big win and I'll be done, one big win. And then they're getting further and further and further into the fucking hole. So that's Alex Dahl. Not sure if I completely answered your question there.
No, you did. Absolutely.
Okay.
Look, in a lesser movie, the relationship with Danny, her TA, and what's happening with her schoolwork would have been this outside focus, and there would have been some whiny like, oh, you're not part of this relationship and stuff like that. But it's all apparent. Like you shorthand it because it's so clear. And I'm just curious, like, do you think that she was able to maintain her physics scholarship, or is she tanking that as well? Like, it's because we see her struggle in the class. We see her taking longer than she should for her tests, and rechecking everything. Or do you think that she's actually okay enough at physics that it's just not a bother for her, and that's why she's kind of shifted to rowing, which she sees as more of a challenge?
I think that in some way it's a mix of both. One, I think she's probably fine. Maybe she got on a semester of academic probation tops, but it is that looking for a new challenge, because when you are coasting on something, she got to that thing, she got the academics, she achieved it, she cracked the system, figured out the pattern, figured out how to do it. She's coasting in theory. I mean, there's a little bit of conflict early on when she does her usual go-to and it doesn't work. And she's like, well, fuck my life. So, but we see her really struggling and trying. And I like to believe that she was able to scrape by, but we do see as she's like rising up the rowing ranks. We have this like montage of the Rocky montage, but meanwhile she's like falling asleep in class and whatever. And certainly her grades are suffering more than they would otherwise. But yeah, she needed a new challenge. Like she's like, I fucking figured that one out. Next one. And I like to think at the end of the film, we have that moment, like the graduate moment. She has the moment of fuck yeah. And then the now what? And I think she's the crash that comes from finishing a script or working on a film or doing anything. You have the moment of I did it, but then it's this empty fucking void of like, now I have to figure out what I'm doing next. And that for me is like the most anxiety inducing existential dread, horrific place to be. And Alex is about to get in there. And I think, you could have a novice too. Like Alex gets an internship. Alex gets her first job. Alex decides to learn French and moves to Paris. Like
still the novice.
Yeah, you could have all these things. But I found for myself, and this is something that I wanted to explore too, is like this idea that I need to be constantly challenged. I need that constant friction to feel like I'm moving anywhere. The sort of classic the devil or idle hands, devil's workshop situation. And that's Alex. I mean, it's just a question of, is she ever going to find balance and sort of realize and prioritize these other aspects of life?
Well, and this is the question that I've wanted to ask you since, seeing your film. Why don't you just relax? I'm sorry. In the film, they say that to Alex, and it just drives her up the wall when people are looking at her obsession and just telling her, why don't you just relax? Where did that come from? Have you had people in your life kind of see you obsessed and hyper focused on something and try and turn you away from it and actually say that to you? Like, why don't you just relax, Lauren?
Absolutely. I mean, it's this constant thing. And then part of it is friends and people making excuses for you making excuses for yourself and this and that. It's fucking irritating to me. And yes, I'm obviously a neurotic. Alex Dahl is a proxy of my younger self in a lot of ways, but like, yeah, I think that comes a lot. And I think that we do it to ourselves too. And actually, this is a tangent. It's interesting happening with the pandemic and sort of evaluation of work-life balance. But like, we also have gotten into this habit of like, treat yourself. You need a day off. You need a day off. Like, oh, I need to rest. I need to whatever. But there's a line between when are you making an excuse and when are you need to get your shit together and go out and do it. So I try to be very not over tell myself to relax, but also too, like it goes to this idea of even with the film, like making a film, like this is my baby. Like everyone else working on it cares about the film, but no one cares about it as much as me. And everyone else is going to say, you know, when I'm stressing out, freaking out, neurotic over it, whatever, like, you know, it's good. It's good. Like we're good. Like it's good. But your gut tells you, no, it's not fucking good. Like, it's not like this film is not going to be perfect. Like it's like a low budget, whatever. Like, but I know that it's not where it could be. And I'm not going to be satisfied with this. Like I can take criticism from people if I feel like I've done my best and like, fuck yeah. The thing that hurts is when the criticism comes and you know, you didn't do your best and you're like, they're fucking, yep, I fucking know it. Like and two, the positive, the same thing goes the other way. Like if I get positive reinforcement on something and I know, like I feel good about it feels good. But if people are sort of, you know, yeah, good job, you know, and it feels like bullshit because I'm like, I could have done better. And that's something that I wanted to explore, this idea of like, you know, like it's a fucking line, but it is this irritation that I think comes up of like people do it. It's an excuse a lot of ways. I don't know. Obviously I feel quite strongly about this.
It cracked me up in the movie. I just want to see your reaction when I asked it. But actually from what you just said about the pandemic and finding that work balance, you know, I find this a lot because I'm either doing a backstory article or something with a podcast. And even back in the day when people got to, you know, when I had my screening series for 17 years in person until we went virtual during the pandemic, like I would be sleep deprived and I actually would need a day off sometimes to reset. Do you not feel that you need a day off creatively, especially when you're writing? Or do you feel you need to push through until the bitter end? And at the bitter end, you'll take a day or two off to come back? Because some writers and artists especially do talk about drawing from the creative well by doing things other than writing, be it reading a good book, listening to a good song, watching a good movie, experiencing a new movie that they've never seen before, stuff like that. Do you do any of those type of things as part of your creative process?
Yes and no. I mean, like with this thing that I'm in on now, the thing is like when I do my best writing, it's that headspace of like you're living in this world and you feel like these characters are alive and you're with you. It's like cheesy as that sounds, and you don't want to leave it. Like I want to stay in it if I'm going to refill. And I do think that you have to kind of refill the tanks, but I try and do it with stepping away, taking the walks, taking a 30-minute dissociative shower and things like that. But I don't know. I find that for me, I need to be writing every day. And I find that the transitions between projects, and this is something that I've really had to deal with. I mean, these are champagne problems, but like, you know, signing with CAA after this film and getting scripts that are coming in, having other projects and like floating. I got the TV things, I have the film things, I got the Novice things, and having to like code switch between these things is really hard for me. It really sucks. And I try to avoid getting out of the headspace of one project. Like I'm in this one right now and I need to like let it go and cut it off and like snip the tether so I can move on and immerse into the next one. But the transition period between is brutal. It sucks. And it's only through sort of the time period and like learning and seeing a pattern that I'm like, okay, well, this is just part of the process. You're going to feel like absolute shit for 2 days. You're going to feel like you're not doing anything. You're not productive. You don't know what you're doing, whatever. And I've just learned to just be okay with it. Like maybe it's the stoicism. It's just like, you know, it is what it is. And it's going to pass one day at a time and on to the next. But I love like writing for me is, it doesn't, I mean, when you're in that headspace that I'm talking about, it doesn't feel like work. It's like where I want to be. So, you know, in some ways I don't want to leave it and it could be a problem, but, yeah, I don't know. I should probably relax more, but I don't know how to.
Wait, that's not what I'm saying.
I don't know how to do vacations. I need a purpose. Like, what am I just sitting here fucking sitting on the sand? Like, what am I doing right now? Like, I need a purpose and it's a problem, but yes, that's me. So,
all right. I love hearing it. There's no right way to do anything. So it's obviously working for you. You know, you said earlier, and this blows me away, that the scene where Alex is breaking up with her TA girlfriend, Danny, and she's also not getting the seat that she wanted to. She just has a complete meltdown in her bathroom and she's cutting. And it's something that we saw bruises and scars for earlier in the film, just briefly, but now we know it definitively. There's blood on the floor. She doesn't want to be discovered for cutting. So she's like wiping it all up with tissue paper, and tissue paper is hanging off the side of her, chest. It was just a wild scene. And it's wild to think that there was a time where the movie was without it. Tell us about when you realized that scene was right for that exact part of the movie.
Well, that scene, the one that I was mentioning earlier, was a later scene that I wrote very last minute, but that scene also was a not always in there as well. I mean, it just became, frankly, like I said, the first draft of the script I wrote 2017, and then the shooting we shot October 2019. I went through a lot of life things in that time, and I was using this as my catharsis or whatever. And a lot of the sort of physical things come from rowing, and the pains that she experiences. All of that is either me or someone I saw or talked to rowers. It's like, those are all real things, but the emotional traumas and things I really pulled from a lot of breakups that I went through at that time, frankly, and like put that in there. And so I think that a screenplay is this evolving document. A film is evolving. The film, you write it 3 times when you write, when you direct, when you edit. But even more than that, it's like an organism. And that, like, I don't know exactly where it came from, but I know the evolution specifically of from the editing and the later scene when they break up, and she's like giving this whole speech, and Isabel's crying, and there's this. She's like ripping Danny's trying to put the medicine on her, and they have the final like moment, like that came very late, like literally a week before. And I think
so that was the scene that came late. Got it.
Yeah. And I think that what I was talking about earlier with the simmering, like I knew that there was one more past, like an emotional moment that needed to be happening, and I hadn't written it yet. And the 80s were like, you got to give us new pages. And I was like, I know. And I sat down and I wrote that, but it had been simmering that way, but needed this moment to sort of, I mean, all the things that I've been saying to you, like that captures all of this. Like she needed to have her moment to finally fucking say this shit and have her little speech and have this emotional moment. And then getting on set too, it was rough. I mean, that was a closed set, and it was me, Delone, Isabel, and the DP. And we were all super, it was rough to watch too, as the director on the monitor, like after the take that we did, the makeup chicks came up to me like, Lauren, should we do a touch up? And I'm just like crying, like I'm in a dark room. They can't see me. And I was like, fuck, I have to like, say something like, yes. And they can hear me crying. But like, it's rough to watch that, and rough to know that the entire crew is watching this and having this experience, and Isabel pulling me aside and saying to me like, Lauren, this is the one thing in the film that I don't have anywhere to pull from with this, like with the cutting specifically, and having to like sit there and have that conversation with her about this idea that, I think a lot of times in film we see cutting, and everyone has their own experience, but from what I've seen, it tends to be like, I just want to feel something is like classic kind of go to, but for me, that sort of thing is always, I've related it to the idea that she actually cannot feel anything in that moment. She's like so sort of just devastated or driven by rage or whatever that she wants to destroy. And this is a very crude kind of summation and analogy, but I think we tend to see, men classically, especially in cinema, they destroy outward, they punch the wall, they, get in a fist fight, they start a war. Women, and this is the whole exploration of the team dynamics and the competition thing with Amy. So it's much more Machiavellian and also internal. And myself and the women that I know, we tend to turn more towards on ourselves. So you have Alex in this moment of this lowest moment of her life. And if she was a man, she'd probably punch a fucking wall. I mean, that's how we tend to see it in the film, but she wants to destroy something. She doesn't want to break anything. She doesn't want to hurt anyone else. And in that moment, she's just so overcome by adrenaline and rage and whatever that she cannot feel. And so that's what this happens. Like she just becomes this block for this thing. And then when she starts feeling, when all the chemicals come or whatever, that's when it stops. And so having to have that conversation with Isabel, knowing the sound guys listening, know the producers got their fucking little earmuffs on and shit, like that is rough, but that's like part of it. And I think that those scenes that are the most difficult to kind of share, or the hardest, like the for me as a repressed Texan, to the sex scene was the very last thing that I edited, because I was like, I cannot sit here and edit this right now. But those scenes are like the ones that people I think respond to most. But got on a tangent here, but
No, that's all great. I mean, the other thing that I really liked, especially that was going on throughout the film, was the visualization of a crab. They explain that a crab is like a bum hit, while you're rowing. It's an accident. It's a paddle in the face. And she starts thinking of herself as the crab, and you see the crab getting boiled into the pot and all that stuff. And I thought that was actually really well done. I thought that was a good motif to throw in there that really worked. Tell us about shooting in the rain and in the water. Because that can't be easy.
Fucking nightmare. No, it's not easy. What is it? Clint Eastwood said you'll never shoot a film on the water. And I'm like, well, yeah, it was horrendous. And our first week was water week. And again, and I'm not coming from a background of doing music videos, commercials, all of that. Like, I don't have a lot of production experience. So it was a fucking shit show. And no one else in the crew besides me knew anything about rowing, how the boats moved, this and that. And that was a shit show. So it was just survival. And everything, the Murphy's Law, classic Murphy's Law. But the first thing that we shot was that foggy row in the middle of the film where she's like by herself and a bird flies across frame, sunrise. I was like, the Lord giveth, like, this is fucking incredible. This is so like going to be a piece of cake. And then that afternoon I was about to like, oh, this is fucking, we're not going to finish this film. But yeah, everything we dealt with lightning and an instance of lightning. We had to cut a scene short. We were halfway through shooting it. And so I had to quickly be like, okay, I can rewrite this scene, like all the things that happened. We needed the second half of the scene. It was like, we're fucked. So I did a rewrite. I wrote what information was conveyed in that scene and like rewrote it elsewhere. And everyone was freezing and like fucking freezing their asses off. And so there was a lot of rewrites happening as things were going. Like the scene where they're eating the peanut butter bagel stuff was supposed to be outside. But everyone was like, this was freezing. And so rewrote it towards the inside. And then shooting on the water too. I mean, the rain, like it was cold and everyone was wet and we didn't have enough like dry clothing and we lost like probably a day of shooting. We were like 2 days behind, I feel like a day in. And it was tough. And by the time that we shot the final race over the course of 3 nights, and the city opened the dam to drain the entire lake or river or whatever it is. Didn't tell us they were doing it. So all the boats, and these boats are incredibly easy to flip. Like if any one of these girls flips over, it's the time to reset, to dry them off, to get them back out there. We're fucked. Like we would have been totally fucked. But so the boats are getting sucked down the river. All this is happening. Bumper boats colliding with each other. You have the 5 actresses in the boat, then you have the actress in the fishing boat, so that's that. Then you got the safety boat, the sound boat, the houseboat, the taxi boat, the lifeboat. I think there's 12 boats out there, missing some. So you have 12 boats in this contained area, all bumper boating with each other, and all the way that I had written the scene. It's supposed to be, they're lined up, and just how to fucking go with the flow. And then too with Todd, because we had learned from the first 2 days, but we made a list that, going into each day, exactly what we needed. We knew to tell the story of this race, like who is where. We need a shot of the boat coming into frame. We need a shot of her passing this rower in front of this rower. We need, this coverage, them looking like all those, just exactly what we needed, and have one take of exactly everything. When we had it, we're like, we just had to trust, like, you think we got it? Okay, we have to move the fuck on. A frame in either direction is unusable. Like, I didn't know if we were going to have that scene. And then we shot the first day, kind of the opening. You have lights and we have a very limited escape to play in. So, you're constantly resetting. It takes forever. Everything takes fucking forever on the water. So it's like shooting, imagine shooting on, you're shooting a car scene, imagine that the road is also moving and you cannot predict where the road is moving. Like that is how it feels.
Well, and your best storytelling moments is, when their teammates are conspiring against her to help Jamie, and you just see like a basic fist bump, so they know that they got her, but they're definitely not going to row that hard for Alex. And that's why Jamie's time is going to be better. So, I mean, I know you were navigating between actual races, but even just some of those character beats where the boats are barely even moving before they're rowing, like those worked as well. Editing is the last stage of storytelling. You are a co-editor of this movie. Are there any scenes that you had to cut that were like a big lesson for you that you want to tell us about? Or was shooting so tight that pretty much everything you shot is in there?
Oh, no. I mean, the first assembly that I cut was 2 hours, 1 minute. And I think the final film without credits is 93, 94, 95 minutes, somewhere around there. I mean, stuff was cut out, and there were more two scenes between Danny and Alex that were cut out that I really loved them, but they did not fit with the movie. There's a whole subplot actually that I cut out, which was Alex is told to only use this like shitty boat. Like there's like a green boat and she's only allowed to use that. And then the coach like lets her use the other one. And then the final race, she's given the shitty boat. I just cut all that out. Because it felt like I realized what this film needed to be. It needs to feel like you're driving straight off a cliff, the end of Thelma and Louise. I wanted the whole film to feel like that. So any deviation from that drive needed to go. And so, lots of the babies were were killed, so to speak, and lots of reworking things, like the opening shot of the film. That it used to be a different scene that I cut out completely. There's a couple scenes in the opening that were cut out. The first 15 minutes were really difficult to nail down. Because the question of who is Alex Dahl, why, what drives her, your classic page 10 to 15, save the cat beat sheet, what's the inciting incident, who is she, like all these moments coming up that, working with Nathan specifically, like that's one of the things that he and I really worked on together was like the opening. And I wrote all these scenes. People were always like, why? I was like, fucking why? It's like the why comes, but I was writing all these scenes and we shot scenes, like there's more on the bridge that we shot, put all these scenes in to answer this question, and people were still asking the question. And I hated these fucking scenes that I was like putting in, and it was not the story I wanted to tell. And so when I was with me and Nathan, we're just like, you know what, fuck it. I was like, if people are going to be asking why, and I'm putting in these scenes that I don't even like to fucking answer why, they're still asking why, fuck these scenes. Like, let's just cut them out. Like, fuck, and let's go the other direction instead of being in this gray middle zone of like not pleasing anybody and just cut all that shit out. Let's make her a creature. Let's make her you're watching her. Let's make her get in her head that you're curious about her. Yeah. And so I cut out all of that. And in doing so, that note, I mean, people still ask it, of course, but it went down like 80%, weirdly. So it's like the note, but beneath the note, like, yes, people still ask why, people still wondering about it. But I think that the problem was it was this weirdly muddy kind of my sound mentor said to me, the best directors always have intention. And it didn't feel like it had strong intentions. So it's just about being fucking bold, fully committing to what you're going to do and accepting that not everyone is going to like it. It's like the producer telling me that the spotlight was too jolting and being able to say, well, great, that means it's working for me. So
what you're essentially talking about is exposition and wrapping everything up pretty with a bow. And the truth is, you learned your lesson, and it's a great lesson for other people to learn as well, that by having a sense of mystery, it keeps the audience engaged and wanting to find out why. And they're hoping that the filmmaker is going to tell them. And the truth is, most of the questions people would have are kind of summed up in that pool scene as to what drives Alex. And then now we're going to get to the ending. The fact that she gets her best time, goes to the board, writes it down.
You think she gets her best time?
Well, whatever her time was, that was my interpretation. She gets a time that she wants to put on the board. She erases it, and then she erases her whole name and just walks out, because it's almost like she accomplished her valedictorian scenario again, in which she got what she personally wanted out of it. She isn't a part of the team, as they pointed out to her. And furthermore, she now doesn't care about the team and doesn't want to be on it. And she's going to go off and do whatever's next, because she just walks right out of there after showing her scars from cutting to her team and showing, how serious she is about really her own personal best. But actually the ending is a big question for me, in which the whole movie, they're saying, if there's lightning, don't get on the water. We got to cut it short. Rain without lightning, it's okay. So there's lightning. All the girls are yelling, we got to turn back. We got to turn back. Alex wants to keep going, of course. There is a big lightning strike and a cut to black. And then you see the rest of this ending. And some person somewhere, possibly me, could also interpret it as she dies in that moment in her quest. And the rest of this is just kind of her dying thoughts of like getting off the team with that cut to black. You never see the lightning flash. You see it off screen and you see it illuminated, but you don't see if it directly strikes her. Now, the other girls in the water would be in danger too, which is the only reason why I don't think the end of the movie is a dying fantasy. But tell me, if you will, some of your thinking behind the construction of that ending, especially with the lightning.
I will say no, she's not dead. That's one thing I'll clearly say. Cool. But no, for me, I wanted the Gattaca, the sort of Gattaca ending, the swimming in the ocean, and then it becomes about like with this final race. The sort of all the, it's like beating the bosses. You have all the levels. One drops off, the next one drops off, and it's her and Jamie. And then Jamie quits. And I think that in some ways, she quits because she has an excuse of the lightning, but really she's quitting because she realizes she's losing. But she will be able to tell herself that it's because the lightning. But Alex keeps going, and because it's really for the whole time, this film has been about doing something that she feels, doing the thing that she feels satisfied with. And I think too, even if that's the goal, there is some ego with it too. And her sort of going in to write her name and her time on the board, first erasing the time, this sort of this signifies like, okay, actually this really isn't about anyone else. It's about myself. And then erasing her name because it's a satisfaction of like, okay, I'm done. I quit. And I wanted to feel like too, I mean, obviously she went to great extents, but she's grown a little bit because we get the sense that in the high school, she only stopped because she had to. She was 5150 and she fucking graduated. Like she had to stop. But now she's hit this point where she's chosen to stop. She has evolved and, she's a very kind of focused one note straight plowing off the cliff kind of gal. But in the end, I think she's leveled up a little bit and found a little bit of stuff. And I think for me, the most poignant moment of the ending is like what I touched on earlier, that final moment of like, she's walking out and has that small smile. And then she sighs and the smile goes away and looks into the camera, which for me is this just signification of like, okay, she did it, but like immediately on to the next thing. But yeah, lightning, you got to have drama. You need some stakes. You need the visuals. And it's also, I think in some ways it's this metaphorical journey of like, she's going through all this stuff. She's coming out the other side. She's emerging from the darkness, from the fog, through the whatever. She's on her own and things get trippy and weird and it's just very kind of emotional internal state. So if we're going to talk about her dying and the end being this wish fulfillment, I think actually it's like this, if anything, the storm is more this concept and thing kind of heightened in her head of this journey, this final stakes that she's dealing with. And she has a moment where she goes in the water and, it was like a reckoning in a lot of ways, I think, with everything up to that point.
It's a punk rock ending. I like it. I mean, she burns down everything that she was building up the entire movie, which is always awesome. And so what was your toughest scene? Oh, actually on the editing, sorry, I forgot to say this. I must commend you. My favorite match cut was when she puts her head down to sleep and then she suddenly match cut to her head on her steering wheel, showing up early for practice. That was an absolutely great cut.
And I fucking love that car too. We called it our like spaceship car or Star Trek. I can't remember something. It was just insane looking thing, but
it was a good cut. But what was your toughest scene? What was your toughest scene on the page that you were sweating about coming back to over and over again as a writer? And then what was your toughest scene as a director?
I mean, I think on the page, and this is with editing as well, it's what I talked about at the beginning, specifically the first 15 minutes, because I had this very clear, but where the film now, where it ended up being, as you see it, is pretty close to probably a version that I wrote early on that I deviated away from, trying to solve this why question, trying to solve this answer. But it was this realization, I think, for me as a writer and something now. And also too, like when I was learning French for a year, I only watched French films and television. I didn't let myself watch anything American. And obviously I've seen French films before, but when you go from watching basically everything American to all French, the thing I notice about French film and cinema is like, they don't hold your hand. Like they don't explain everything. There's going to be questions, and this realization that it's okay for people to have questions and for people to want to have a conversation about it and disagree, and not trying to like feed everything in. Like that for me was a growing moment as a writer. And it takes balls, you got to like accept that you're not going to solve everything. And then in terms of a director, I mean,
but wait, pick a scene. What was your toughest scene on the page?
The toughest specific scene? Oh God, I don't know specifically. It's been so long since I've looked at the script.
Just one you remember stressing about, like, and that you found yourself maybe rewriting a bunch of times over and over.
I know that the bridge scene that I cut out, it used to extend longer, and there was this whole dialogue between her redheaded roommate Winona and her that again is kind of a setup. And I hated that scene, and I wrote that, and I probably rewrote a bunch of different things, and then I cut it out because it just didn't fit the film. And the opposite of that question is some things stick, like getting into the flow of writing, like the final race. Like I don't know if there was ever really a lot of kind of edits with it. Like it was pretty much the same thing from the beginning. Some things when they work, but in terms of like specific scenes.
Yeah, your toughest scene as a director now that you're on set. I mean, obviously we know Water Week was hell. Was there anything else you want to tell us that was not on the water that was like a really tough scene that you had to rise to as a director? to convey?
I think, aside from the one that I've already talked about with the cutting and having to have that moment and the sex scene of having to shoot a sex scene in like the lights and being like, why are the lights so bright? And Todd being like, we need to see what we're seeing here. And me being from repressed Texas and awkward as fuck. Aside from those two, I think that the hardest scene for me would have been the first day, and not because the scene is hard. It's actually the most simple scene of the film, but I can watch this film and tell that it's the worst. It feels like the worst directed scene in the film because it was my first dialogue scene. And that was a scene between Coach Pete and Alex sitting in his office where they have this back and forth. And that was hard for me because I came from doing this week of Water Week where it was just survival and you don't have time to think or overthink or analyze. Like you just fucking, this is what we're doing today. You don't like, that's it. But with this more intimate thing and coming up against the time constraints, and then how do you actually direct actors now they're actually speaking and talking to one another. Like, how do you do that? Like that for me was tough. It's like a very simple scene, but just because it required, I think, stepping into a zone that I hadn't done before. I mean, but any other scene, all the scenes for me, because I don't come from a production background, everything felt difficult in the sense that I don't know what the fuck's going on. Not really. I mean, I know what I want. I communicate it to my team. I learn. But the ones that were hard for me were the ones that were the vulnerability or my vulnerability. It was a big thing.
What's next? What are you working on next?
The analogy I like to give these days is that, being a writer director is like having children in the 1800s. You have to have a lot of them because they're all not going to make it to adulthood. And you have to love them all. You have to nurture them all. But I can't tell you which ones are going to see the light of day. That being said, the thing that I'm neck deep on writing right now is a lesbian sex comedy. Nothing like The Novice in theory, but that's what I'm hoping to do next. And
does it have a title? Things.
It does, but I'm not going to say it because
don't if you don't want to. That's all good.
Yeah, it might change. And and then too, I mean, I have a little bit of everything. I have a couple potential action things. I have a horror film, a historical horror film. My sort of long-term goal, we've talked about the light at the end of the tunnel. I have like this historical fantasy thing that I want to do in 8 years. So, I set these other goals.
Why 8 years? Why 8 years?
It was a 10-year goal that I set in 2019. I guess now we're down to 7, actually.
Okay.
So now I have 7 years.
Have you started writing it, or is it something that you want to write?
No, I've started. I started as a novel actually in 2015, and so I have half a novel written, and the rest is kind of like beat it out and roughly outlined and done all the research, and wrote a pilot for it. But it's sort of this deciding, the limited series are a thing happening. Like there's so much in it. Like, is this a limited series? Who's going to spend this much money making a limited series? I'm not even ready for it yet. What's the point? But then I'm reading scripts like Avatar and Lord of the Rings, and they're like, some of the Lord of the Rings scripts, 172 pages. Now, granted, it's Lord of the Rings and there's IP, and we can get into a whole conversation about that whole game. But there's also the question comes up of, do I just finish this as a novel and try to get that and then have the IP that then we can get? I mean, that's a whole other
that's the way to go. I mean, like
thing.
There's a million different routes on that, because some people, if they don't turn it into a novel, they turn it into a graphic novel. And then they have a screenplay based on the graphic novel that they wrote, so that they have tested IP. Even if the graphic novel didn't become a bestseller, though, that has worked before. No, I know.
To me, like,
it's chicken or the egg. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I in the graphic novel route, I actually thought about, but I realized that, like, that's not my medium. I'm not someone who reads comics really. Don't
force yourself into it, then, obviously.
So wouldn't do it exactly.
Yeah,
and I think,
but maybe it works as a novel, or maybe you're just able to get it as a screenplay. So
ideally, yeah, like, yeah. I'm just like, you know what? Just, I got to make a couple things, and then hopefully dream big, shoot for the stars.
Absolutely.
Set those North Star. That's my North Star. But
I hope you make it one of these days, and I want to hear more about it. Congrats on your Spirit Award nomination, and Lauren, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. It was a blast.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to writer-director Lauren Hadaway for being so generous with her time and coming down to discuss her debut feature film, The Novice. And remember, folks, if you're a Spirits Award voter, I believe voting begins on February 11th, 2022. And The Novice is up for 5 awards, including Best Feature. And I really encourage you to make sure to watch this film before you cast your final vote. Of course, after you support independent cinema and watch The Novice, and you can find it practically anywhere you rent a movie online, I hope you check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You could read us on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. If you've never read us before, I highly recommend you check out our free issue, which has a lot of cool stuff in it. We even put cool articles into our published issues after we published them. We recently did that with a Star Wars Visions article, where we interviewed 4 of the Japanese anime directors for Star Wars Vision for Disney Plus. And it's a 5,000 word plus article. It's really big. We put excerpts of it on our website, backstory.net, that you could read and check out. And look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and iTunes and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where all the Zoom interviews that we do that become podcasts go. You could watch us do the interview. It would mean a lot to me to have you support my passion project. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2022. All rights reserved. If you want to follow me on social media, you could find me as Yo Goldsmith on Twitter or Backstory_mag on Twitter, or you could find me on Instagram with those same handles, Yo Goldsmith or Backstory_mag. I have a Facebook fan page you could find me on. You could also send me an email to backstoryletters@gmail.com. I will do my best to go through them. I always love hearing from everybody and take time to respond. It just takes me a little while sometimes. So feel free to write in anytime. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A podcast, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.